Well, welcome everyone to this bioenergy update, a briefing. My name is Jarrod Leak and I'm the CEO for the Alliance of Energy Productivity. And I'd like to start this webinar by acknowledging the traditional owners of where I'm living and broadcasting from in the northern suburbs of Sydney, that being the Darramurrugal people. And I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. For those of you who are new to A2EP, we are a non-for-profit organisation funded by members who share our mission to double Australia's energy productivity. In short, we help businesses pursue a cleaner and more successful future by producing more with less. It's all about more dollars, less gigajoules. We explore world's best practice, we connect stakeholders and members, and we advocate for programs and policy to help increase energy productivity, jobs, all towards a zero emissions future. In this webinar meeting format we have today, please add your questions to the Q&A box and then upvote the questions you like. If you have any technical questions, you can put them in the chat box. But we're certainly hoping for plenty of interaction and questions from you today. The presentation will be recorded and the slides along with the presentation will be distributed sometime early next week. So you'll arrive to see those and so no need to make too many screenshots or notes as we go through this afternoon. We have a fantastic lineup for you today. We are joined today by Dr. Amy Philbrook and Matt Walden from ARENA. Welcome Amy and Matt. We have Shahana McKenzie from Bioenergy Australia. Welcome Shahana. Fiona Woodhouse from Utilitas. And finally Craig Dugan from Optimal Group. All going to be presenting on, we're going to see roadmaps from ARENA, a state of play update from Bioenergy Australia, and an update on the BioHub from Fiona Waterhouse, and then from Craig an update on projects he's doing for McCain. I just want to have a quick update for you regarding the Renewables in Ag conference, which was on yesterday in Dubbo. It was a fantastic event, about 350 or so people out there, and really good to be having that face-to-face and networking, connecting with people once more. A bit of a glimpse of things getting back to normal, and I can tell you it was very, very nice and most appreciated. I said about 350 people there, and I can tell you the feeling amongst that agricultural community that was there was certainly one of looking to change and looking to become more sustainable and looking for solutions. At the same time, quite wary of advice from others, anyone but other farmers. But they're very much a competitive bunch and they're very keen to take on new tech in a very cautious manner though. So it was great to see the focus on bioenergy within the ag community. They can see what's been happening, especially in the piggery area, and what's happening further within dairy and chicken litter as well. So they can see the potential there. They certainly do want to do a lot more in bioenergy. There's also some really good examples of R&D happening to improve on-site biodigestion. So the future looks really bright within agriculture, and you've got a lot of people keen to participate, that's for sure. At the same time, there's plenty of barriers for them to grow, whether that be local council approvals or regulations stopping co-digestion. We might find ourselves touching on a few of those today as we go through. Shahana McKenzie, the CEO for Bioenergy Australia, been there for nearly 4 years, and may I say during that time has certainly seen the profile of bioenergy really take off and the reach for Bioenergy Australia really take off. Shahana, probably drawing on all your experience for previous non-for-profits and advocacy experience there, and it certainly looks like it's working. So over to you, Shahana, for an update.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thanks, Jarrod. And I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, who are the custodians of the land where I am in Canberra, and delighted to be partnering with you on doing this. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to keep mine really short. There's also a helicopter hovering overhead and tradesmen out the front, so it's a little bit of a challenging environment right now. But I will very quickly get through mine so that you can hear from some fantastic experts. who can speak to the projects that they're delivering, which I think will be really interesting. It was also, I'd like to thank Amy and Matt for presenting on the roadmap and ARENA and the incredible support that ARENA have provided to the bioenergy industry in Australia. It really has been substantial over the time that, well, before me, but also since I've been here, it's certainly been something that has been lifting the industry and driving us forward. Okay. Now we're having, okay, great. So look, most of you on the call already know about this, but I thought I'd give a little bit of an update in terms of Bioenergy Australia. So we have just over 150 members. We've had a 300% increase since 2017. We run a number of different industry alliances, and probably the two interesting ones, one is actually meeting right now, which is our Renewable Heat Alliance. We also run one which is called the Renewable Gas Alliance. So those two particular alliances are very focused on driving commercial outcomes in the sector across those two particular areas. The Renewable Gas Alliance, as an example, has over 50 organisations participating, and it has a very strong work plan in seeking to drive development of the industry. So it's working in 3 separate subgroups, one in relation to certification and incentivisation, and that group is working with the Clean Energy Regulator on the development of the new biomethane method, also looking at certification methods, point of origin, how we can learn things from international perspectives and the like. The second group is looking at regulations and regulatory and specification and injection sort of challenges and issues that we need to overcome. So that is working very closely in terms of the Australian standard on the gas spec, looking at how other countries have navigated the process of injecting renewable gas into the gas system, and working very closely across the Malabar project in terms of understanding the steps that they're taking and how we as an industry body and membership group can seek to support that. The third group is looking at, and Kelly, I think, raised it a bit earlier, but looking at digestate specifically. So looking at developing an Australian standard with partnering across New Zealand as well, and looking at how we can monetize digestate in order for that to be able to support the development of projects moving forward. And so similarly across the other 6 alliances that we run, very similarly, they all have work plans very specifically focused on particular areas. So if there's anybody out there that is interested in understanding more in terms of the work that we're doing across a particular stream, please feel free to get in touch. As you can see, government submissions, media, you know, we're very much around advocating and campaigning in order to be able to drive the development of the industry. Another key point here is, and Amy is actually one of our representatives on one of the tasks, we are the representative body for participation in the International Energy Agency Technology Collaboration Program on bioenergy. And so we, across those 7 tasks, have access to significant information, international experts, leaders and the like, in order to be able to support informed decision making and projects being able to be driven forward. So please feel free to reach out if we can support across any of those fronts. Look, it's already been talked about, and I can't help but put up a photo of Angus. I love to put up a photo of Angus. And I could provide a lot of commentary on my thoughts regarding the gas power station, but I'm not going to. I think there's some fantastic opportunities for bioenergy in the Hunter region that could be supplying some significant baseload. But anyway, that's another matter. Look, from 2017, what we identified at Bioenergy Australia was a need for a clear strategy and roadmap for the development of the industry into the future in Australia. And so we advocated for that in the lead up to the last federal election, and post that election, the coalition did commit to developing that. So we're delighted that that's now, you know, in the final stages, and hoping for that to be released any month now, soon-ish would be great. And so really for us, what we're hoping that that's going to provide is some channeling and some focus in terms of areas that will then lend themselves to prioritisation in terms of government policy. Certainly, if we look at the areas within our remit that are attracting the highest amount of attention at the moment in Australia, it is around certainly biomethane and biogas. So whether that's biomethane for grid injection or biogas for behind the meter electricity production, those two areas do have a significant increase in terms of the level of interest. It's the area that we're seeing one of the greatest increases in terms of membership from our perspective, and it is the area where we are seeing the greatest level of government interest, whether that be at the federal level, the state level, or even at local council level. It is also the area that we're seeing cross-industry sort of sector interest as well. So across other industries, considering bioenergy, we're seeing a huge amount of interest across the AD space as a particular focus. The second sort of area that we are seeing a significant level of interest in terms of growth from our perspective is sustainable aviation fuels. So one of those other alliances that we run is the Sustainable Aviation Fuels Alliance of Australia and New Zealand. And we're actually in the process of commissioning a report right now, which is on bridging the gap. So developing an industry in Australia, a SAF industry in Australia. So our membership in that space has significantly increased as well. And I would say that whilst, planes aren't flying in the air as much as they have been previously, SAF has been an area that has received significant international attention and focus through other governments in seeking to drive a post-COVID recovery in terms of developing new, particularly export industries for countries. So looking over within the European market, but also looking within the US, there's significant, growth taking place at the moment in terms of new projects. One of our members, Gevo, just announced the other day breaking ground on a new project. And so from our perspective, we really do see SAF as a big opportunity in Australia moving forward. We have, some fantastic feedstock availability, and the technologies are improving at a rapid pace in that space. The third area that we do see a large amount of potential interest as well is around renewable heat and the creation of our Renewable Heat Alliance. So whether that is from a range of different feedstocks, that for us is an area that we do see bioenergy could play a leading role moving forward. And for that to be tying into a range of different other things. So whether that is around waste minimisation, as Amy and Matt were talking about earlier, with all of these things, looking at regional job creation and regional investment and economic strategies moving forward. So from our perspective, we do see that that is also an area of significant opportunity moving forward in Australia. And with that, I will hand over back to you guys.
Thanks very much, Shahana. And I'll just pick up on that last one on renewable heat. We are working with the Race for 2030 CRC, and certainly bioenergy came up a lot as what's needed to fill the gap. There's electrification options, of course, down maybe 150 degrees heating temperature. Maybe that goes to 160, 170, 180. But anything above that and anything where you cannot recover heat in the individual process, you're left with pretty much renewable bioenergy or hydrogen if you want to decarbonise.
Exactly. And I think there's some interesting things that, so an Australian researcher actually I think it was earlier last year, there was a really interesting project that was around lignin being used as a metallurgic coal replacement effectively, and some fantastic work being done in that space, and that for us is a really big opportunity. Another thing that I found really interesting, and obviously I haven't gone through the entire thing yet, but the recent report by the IEA that was put out just a couple of days ago indicated that by 2050, if you sort of dive into the detail a bit, by 2050 it looks like biomethane and hydrogen will actually be on par in terms of production and use. So it's quite interesting that there's a huge amount of hype, understandable hype, I suppose you could say, in relation to hydrogen. And I think, some of the significant opportunities, if we look at renewable heat, those technologies are ready now. They are deployable now. They are able to be decarbonising before we hit 2030. And similarly around the anaerobic digestion space. So we're really pushing as hard as we can for these, very commercial ready technologies to be deployed, and for governments to become more engaged and involved in supporting them moving forward, because we think there's, a big opportunity there.
Absolutely, and I think it's so economical now as well, as we saw from the ARENA helped with the biomass burning project at Manildra, the MSM milling. I understand since that project's gone ahead, in multiple states is happening with, that's really helped spur a lot of investment for biomass heating and steam generation. So it's here and now.
Exactly. It certainly is. And yeah, I mean, even just that one technology provider who did that particular project, now his joke was 2 years ago, when he had a phone call from someone who was potentially interested in doing a project, he would alert everyone in his family about the excitement. And now it's reached a point where he can't actually keep up with the amount of potential business that's available.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that through the new businesses coming online in Australia and delivering projects. So, I mean, we would encourage anyone who's looking at doing a project to do their due diligence, to make sure that you do look around and make sure that the technology provided that you're seeking to engage with is a credible operator and a developer in Australia that has experience and understands what they're doing.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thanks, Shahana. A quick question we'll throw at you, just with without wanting to open a can of worms and go down the peaker discussion again. But you did put it out there. What would you see a bioenergy future there for the Hunter Valley?
Oh, well, I mean, we do have. I mean, there is an old power station that has already made a commitment to going to 100% biomass in that region. So Hunter Energy is the name of the project. I think that they've changed the name of the actual, I think it's Verdana, is now what it's called. Funnily enough, we were just doing a site visit there a couple of weeks ago. But that has the potential, based on the technology that's actually present in that particular power station. It used to be coal tailings was what it was. And so it had to have a certain type of bed in it in order to be able to process that. Now that particular type is actually able to run on 100% biomass. So as an example, there is a former coal-fired power station that could be operating on sawmill residues and other waste streams from the region, that could be creating significantly more jobs in terms of a potential option. So, but look, I think that the one thing that we do need to recognise moving forward is that it is going to take a jigsaw puzzle of technologies and energy solutions in order for us to meet what I think are the decarbonisation actions that we should be taking. So I think that there's a place for many different things here, and we're certainly spending 99% of our time advocating for deployment of our technologies rather than spending time talking about the others.
Gotcha. Thanks very much, Shahana. Great to have the update, and great that the helicopter and tradesman held off the noise and we could hear.
Oh, really? Did it? Because I was hearing it and I was really, I was like, no, be quiet.
Thank you very much. Very good. And so now we'll move on to the BioHub concept. Fiona, if you could start sharing your screen, I'll give you a quick introduction if you like. Fiona Woodhouse is the Managing Director and CEO of Utilitas since 2010. So I've been working on this for quite some time, and we've had an update on BioHub concept. I think a couple of years ago we had you on, Fiona. So really looking forward to see how things have developed over the last year or two, and so I'll hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jarrod, and great to be here. Just checking that you can see my PowerPoint.
Can see it and can hear it, all looking good.
All good. Okay, so now now I've just got to get it on the right page to be able to change pages. So just by way of a bit of an introduction for those of you who don't know, Utilitas is a bioenergy developer. We've been in the Australian market for
Ooh, I've lost you there. That's not sound good. Fiona,
Industrial parks.
Fiona, if you can hear me, the sound just went really poorly there. It was fine earlier. Would you mind just trying?
If I stop sharing the video, will it still share the presentation?
It sure will, and that might give you a bit more bandwidth for the audio. Go for it.
How's that?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So Utilitas is a bioenergy developer. We originate, design, finance, manage utility grade, commercial scale green gas infrastructure critical to the circular economy. Biogas from anaerobic digestion is at the core of our projects, and we look to then seek to build out an industrial park around a biogas plant, basically to optimize the synergies of upstream and downstream processing. So we design and finance and manage biogas plants, and we've also become a broker. So we actually broker energy, and as our portfolio of projects rolls out, we will also be brokering everything that's related to a biohub in time. Sorry, I'm just trying to get a clicker on. So just to kind of, I will give a specific update on our Bundaberg biohub, but I thought what I'd do is just also provide a little bit of context to draw together some of the discussions that have been the first part of this session. So there's three major challenges in the Australian market to commercialising utility grade biogas projects. The first one is customer expectations. So the 350 site assessments that we've done with customers, mostly industrial food processors and a few municipal wastewater treatment plant facilities, the expectations from customers in this market is that a biogas developer and operator needs to deliver them sustainable waste disposal and wastewater disposal with no capex to them and parity or better OPEX. At the same time, they need to deliver carbon neutral energy, and that's electricity, gas, and in the future transport fuel. And they need to do it with no capex from the customer, parity or better OPEX. And at the same time, we need to contemporaneously report on the performance of the business in stepping towards net zero emissions from a production point of view, but increasingly the big food and beverage clients are under pressure to also demonstrate net zero logistics, which is potentially an even bigger challenge. So there's very, very high customer expectations, are very hard to get commitments unless you can deliver on all three of those items. And I think that's certainly been one of the challenges in being able to scale a portfolio of projects in this space. The second thing is these projects, when you're talking about even utility grade commercial scale biogas plants, they're very small scale and you really need a lot of them. So just for example, the typical utility scale biogas plant that we're developing at the moment, it's just at the bottom end of the typical plant that is deployed in the UK and Europe. And it's about 350 gigajoules a day of biogas, which takes about 180 tonnes of waste a day, which if you were to transport all of that by truck is about 20 truckloads, which is about 40 truck movements. So what you're talking about is quite a significant facility in the scheme of things. Now, if you were to just displace 10% of the current gas network with biogas from biomethane plants at that scale, we need 1,250 of them. And by 2031, based on current demand, we need 1,641 of them. So when we start thinking, and we have none. So I guess at the moment, there's the Gemina project at Malabar, and there's a few others that are coming along in the background, including the first three of ours. But you know, we've got a long way to go. Whereas if you look at Germany, they have about 250 biogas to biomethane plants, and in France at the moment, a new biogas to gas grid project is being connected to the grid every week, according to current reports. So it is possible to scale at the pace that is reflected in this slide, but it's those markets have had very different conditions in order to incentivize that scale up and to mobilize that scale up. So I think that's one of our key challenges in this market. And the third one, and probably the most important one in a sense, is that these projects aren't for the faint-hearted. You're trying to build green infrastructure that is institutionally investable, because when you're talking utility grade, you're talking tier 1 delivery partners, you're talking blue chip counterparts in all the contracts. They're very, very high. They set a very high bar in terms of the standard that the project needs to comply with, let alone the technical standards to upgrade gas and to manage 20 truckloads of waste a day. So the other thing is, as a developer, you actually have to carry the cost, as we have done for the last decade, to basically pull together everything around the circle. So you've got to facilitate the land arrangements, planning approvals, connections. You've got to secure sufficient feedstock. And in Australia at the moment, your project needs to be able to get at least $50 a tonne for any of the feedstocks you bring to it at this scale. And you then need to get gas purchase agreements or hydrogen purchase agreements, depending on what you're doing. And those feedstock, the feedstock arrangements and the energy offtake arrangements legally need to back each other. So you need to be able to demonstrate to investors that you have back-to-back the energy risks that sit inside the energy contract, and that you back-to-back those with your feedstock availability and how you're managing liquidated damages and all those kinds of things within those contracts. So they're actually very, very complex kind of arrangements. The next thing in Australia that we have to do in particular is we've got to look at monetizing the digester, and Shahana mentioned this. So there's two aspects of that. You've got to manage the liquid phase of the digestate as a recyclant, or clean it up and reuse it in the plant, or negotiate with a wastewater treatment plant owner to put it into the sewage system as trade waste. If you're not able to get some kind of irrigation or other arrangement around the project. So again, there's some costs to that depending on where the project is located, and some risks. The other thing is then monetizing the solid phase digestate and being able to create revenues, because at the moment you need to basically be able to dispose of the liquid waste at no net cost to the project overall, depending on how you're doing that. And you need to be able to monetize the digestate with at least a $20 a tonne value. If you can't do that, then you can't secure a project. At the moment, the energy pricing, and I'll show the some of the assumptions around the levelized cost of biomethane. The challenge we have at the moment, the expectation in the market is that people will not pay more than parity for either waste disposal, wastewater disposal, or energy that they might purchase. So without any incentives, without green gas certificates, without a renewable gas trading system, or some kind of way to be able to monetize the green characteristics of the gas, it makes it very hard. So you basically have to make that revenue up in higher gate fee expectations, and you have to monetize the digestate. The other thing then, of course, is planning approvals and connections, and we've certainly secured those for a number of biogas projects in Australia. Every local government is different, every state government is different, and so every time you go to do a project, you have to work very hard at getting through your planning approvals and connections. And of course, unless you've got 1 to 6 all tied up in a bow and packaged up in a bankable feasibility study or a project definition statement, then you're not getting finance. So basically you have to go around that whole loop, and as a developer you need to put all of that together yourself. So actually Jarrod asked me if I could present, and this is the first time we've ever presented this from our data, the levelized cost of energy in terms of biomethane. I've constrained this to just being the actual gas upgrading unit, and you'll see there that I'm assuming that the biogas supply to the upgrader is at $8.50 a gigajoule, and that the parasitic demand for that upgrader only is able to be acquired at $80 a megawatt hour. That the land lease for the upgrader only is $100,000 a year, that the CTS, the custody transfer station, actually belongs to the network owner. We've allowed for a 20-year life, a 6% discount factor. We've assumed no feed-in tariff in either direction, no incentives and subsidies. One of the critical things about the Australian market, there's no feed-in tariff for feeding in gas to the grid like there is in the UK, where basically for the first 140,000 gigajoules, I think it is, you receive about $22 a gigajoule for as a feed-in tariff from the network. None of those things exist here, but the other side of that problem is there isn't also tariff rules around what you can be charged by the network owner for the custody arrangements for putting the biogas into the gas grid. So some of the discussions that we've had with network owners have, suggested that a custody transfer fee could be anything up to $3 just for the supervision of the gas into the network. So those things need to be defined, and they haven't yet been defined. So you can see there that we're kind of, assuming an $8.50 a gigajoule for the biogas supply. Our modelling as designed, and obviously we'll be confirming this as we now move the projects through the delivery stages, is sort of an average of about $13.61. The average levelised cost of biomethane at the moment in the Australian market to produce it. So just to give you an update on it, Utilitas has long stated since our launch at International Energy Week in Melbourne in 2010, we had the vision that we want to unleash up to 100 biogas plants across Australia in 100 regional communities. That still remains our vision, and we're working towards that every single minute of every single day. Biohub 1 is Bundaberg Biohub, where we acquired the retired Bundaberg East wastewater treatment plant on 9.5 acres off the Bundaberg Regional Council. Took a number of years to go through a few tender processes, but the council were fantastic, and we basically just held hands until we delivered it. So it was an amazing outcome. That site is master planned, and we have a number of tenancies on that site. The Bundaberg Regional Council and Utilitas both rent laboratory space that's existing on the site. The Bundaberg Council water services laboratory is located there, and so is Utilitas's biorefining laboratory and pilot scale biorefining technology. Our prime site, we've just spent some money with our development partners, Smart Capital, to remove some of the old legacy infrastructure on the pink tip of the site. It was quite an exercise, but it's turned out to create a beautiful piece of land that we are now calling for expressions of interest. In the next few weeks, we will be starting to create the world's first net zero logistics experience centre for vehicles, equipment and fuels. We've done quite a lot of consultation with the traditional original equipment manufacturers like Scania and New Holland and others. And we're also working with the next generation of OEMs like Hyzon and others to look at what does a seat in an experience centre look like in a net zero logistics experience centre. Of course, those of you who understand trucks and cars will know that experience centres are a core part of selling vehicles, particularly at fleet level, both trucks and cars. The example up on the screen is one of the Scania experience centres in Sweden, and people can come and look at the engines, and they can drive the vehicles, and they can put the vehicles through their paces, and they can learn about new engine innovations and all those kinds of things. This is a mainstream part of the vehicle industry. Similarly with New Holland, they have a biomethane tractor, and hopefully we're going to be presenting it next year at Bioeconomy Bundaberg 2022. We will hopefully have a biomethane tractor by New Holland to be able to show everybody and put through its paces on the Experience Centre. New Holland for some, I think 10 years, have had in Italy a demonstration farm that actually shows a big biogas plant producing biomethane, using it in the tractor, growing a crop, using the crop in the and other local manures and things in the biogas plant so they've actually had an experience centre centred around the production of biomethane for their vehicles, including their tractors. So that's going to be a key piece of the Bundaberg Biohub, and probably, I guess, our anchor arrangement. We're in partnership with Recarbon, a Silicon Valley-based hydrogen technology company. They have an innovative biohydrogen technology that converts carbon emissions and methane and CO2 into syngas and hydrogen. We're just in the process of preparing all the details to be able to order the first hydrogen refueling station, which will go on their tenancy, which is the light pink down in the bottom corner. And I guess one of the things that the vehicle and equipment suppliers have been telling us as we're rolling out this net zero logistics experience and everything that we're wrapping around heavy vehicle logistics in Bundaberg, they've been telling us that as a minimum we need to have 200 kilos a day of hydrogen available. We need a refueling station, and basically until we place the order for the refueling station, the big OEMs are not going to take the project seriously. So there's some very clear threshold points that the market has been telling us about what we need to have in place. And so our primary focus at the moment is to place the order for the refueling station, which hopefully should happen in the next few months. So quite exciting. Bundaberg Regional Council are still an active participant in the project. And we have, in order to fully close that circle of all of the things that we need to pull together to make a utility grade commercial scale biogas project work in Australia, Utilitas has created two other entities. One is Territas, and Territas has a very clear mandate to monetize all the digestate from our portfolio of projects as we roll that out. It has some very exciting partners involved in that process, and we'll be looking to demonstrate some of the technologies and processes at the Bundaberg Biohub as part of, I guess, a showcase site for just what can happen around a biohub to be able to commercialize a lot of the things that are necessary for net zero production and logistics and are obviously fundamental to the bioeconomy. We've also created a business called Net Zero Fuels, and Net Zero Fuels will be in partnership with some significant players looking to roll out refueling stations for multi-fuels that are helping to decarbonise the economy. So I guess that's the update. There's a lot of traction, there's a lot of movement. It's taken 7 years to get to here, And in some way, I feel like we're still at, you know, the very start of the journey. But I guess when you put it into context, essentially, you know, in Australia, all of us on this call today are creating the market. So we are collectively creating this market from nothing together. So it's not surprising that we should measure its progress in decades.
Indeed. Yeah, wow.
That's it.
Yeah.
So that's our beautiful site. It's the local custodians, the Balai, the Grang, and the Tarablang Bunda people. We have an active process that we're working on to start to showcase some of the things that the Indigenous community have been doing for millennia in the bioeconomy. And we actually have a, you know, we always say that we're in bioeconomy 3.0 in Bundaberg. So bioeconomy 1.0 was the Indigenous bioeconomy. Bioeconomy 2.0 was the agrarian food processing bioeconomy. And bioeconomy 3.0 in Bundaberg is net zero production and logistics. So.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was fantastic, and I'll remind everyone there's a recording of that because that was such good information that I think we'll have a few going over that again, and really appreciate it. A lot of what you're saying certainly rings true with what was talked at the Ag Energy conference yesterday. Although it was good to hear that you've got the support from the OEMs for the truck and the tractor there. There were stories around yesterday of others just saying, look, we just can't be bothered. That was a local trader, not the actual OEM themselves. A local representative saying, look, we can't be bothered trying to bring a new line of biofuel type tractors out. But good to know that you're making inroads there, and I'll certainly be keen to share that with others from the likes of the consultants at Movement. They'll be very happy to hear that. It sounds like
well, it is about thresholds, I guess.
Mm.
It's definitely about thresholds. So unless you're willing to put your money on the line to acquire a site and put an order in for a refueling station, then, you know, naturally nobody's going to take you seriously. And I think fair enough. You know, it's tough, but you know, that's the benchmark.
It's really nice to see that financial model that you have today. I mean, clearly some tough equations you've got to deal with there, and some sort of paradigm shift has to happen where you're getting credit for, say, for instance, the waste that's being taken, which would otherwise end up being methane and creating a huge GWP issue with that. So something. A step change is obviously needed to see this on, but it's nice to know. I mean, you've with the working through the technologies and the concept that you're really building a platform to be replicated in so many places around Australia. So congratulations and thanks very much for the update.
Thank you.
Very good. And now I'd like to move on to using that biogas in action in an industrial setting. And I'd like to ask Craig Dugan if you could start sharing your screen as I give you a quick introduction. Craig Dugan is the CEO of Optimal Group, has been now for nearly 10 years, Craig, getting on towards 10 years for Optimal. Congratulations. Before that, Craig worked with developed the local company Process Group, which was oil and gas focused. But now, Craig, you've seen the light. You've come across to for your sins to go for a green gas revolution, and yeah, looking forward to getting an update from what Optimal is up to in this space.
Okay, so I trust everybody can hear me. So look, I'm going to talk about the project at McKenzie today, but just a little bit of an intro as to how we got there, and because it's quite interesting in terms of how our business has changed. So, you know, we all know the story here in terms of climate change, you know, culture change, but the opportunity that's coming from it. And I guess, you know, our business, when we first started Optimal in 2012, we were doing a lot in the green building space. And then we found building developers and architects started saying, oh, I'm not sure about using natural gas. You know, but at that point, you know, this is Collins Square in Melbourne. We power the whole of Collins Square, so that's 5 35-story office towers. And, you know, so cogen behind the meter or trigen as they are look fantastic. They are still, that's still the greenest complex in Melbourne, probably in Australia. But it's fallen out of favour in terms of, because of natural gas. And so, you know, not so long ago, gas was seen as clean and cheap and abundant. You know, not so long ago, electric cars were still over the horizon, you know, but obviously now that has changed. We've reached a tipping point, and I think one thing that we're certainly seeing, you know, in the last 6 months is that the market is changing faster than I think we could have anticipated. I'm seeing customers today that are desperate for what we can do, whereas 12 months ago they weren't interested, and they weren't interested because the environmental issues for them weren't important. They paid lip service, but now it's a problem. So we've seen, you know, we've all seen what's happened to, I guess, to the electricity grids. And if I just move these animations forward, you know, everyone's put rooftop solar in. We're now seeing grid scale solar, grid scale wind, grid scale batteries. So all of that is old news and part of the modern electricity network. If we think about thermal, now that's where, you know, it really gets interesting for a lot of our customers. And, you know, quite simply, if I use McCain's as an example, Powercore said to McCain's, you cannot power your boiler from electricity. So they've got 8 megawatt electrical, 25 megawatt thermal, and the grid just does not have the capacity, even if McCain's wanted to change that gas boiler out to electric. So here's the problem, you know, that in general terms, these big industrials, you know, particularly in food manufacturing, way more than 50% of their energy is thermal, and if it's steam, it's not going to come from heat pumps. You know, this is the McCain's example in particular. So, you know, how does McCain's go to net zero, and it's a family-owned company, which they want to do. So, you know, back in the built environment, so Collins Square, we power the whole of Collins Square. They wanted to put some solar power in there, so they did, but the total available roof space was only 100, could get 100 kilowatts of solar. So that's a fraction of the building demand. So if you want to go to this, if you want to have a building that's net zero, you know, just simply putting a bit of solar on the roof obviously doesn't do the job. Now, I guess the other interesting part about this is Victoria's electricity grid, and I'm not sure if my animation is going to work. Oh, okay, it's not going to work. What happens when you push the animation button on that is the red moves from the west right across to the east. In other words, by 2025, Victoria's or Melbourne's grid capacity is going to be severely constrained, and this slide was actually produced before electric cars were really coming to the fore. So our existing electricity networks are already constrained. We have multiple large customers, both in CBD customers, so City of Sydney, some of the buildings in Melbourne, where one of the drivers for putting our systems in was simply because there wasn't enough power available from the grid. So, you know, we need more than cables, and simply building more cables is just going to add more to our electricity cost. Interestingly, though, there's the same map of Melbourne, and that's Melbourne's gas grid. So, you know, the gas grid goes where the electricity grid goes. So if you can have green molecules in that gas grid, then you can get green electricity to those customers through the gas grid. So food waste, as we all know, food waste is a big problem. You know, the numbers here in Australia compared to Europe are frightening. 3% of Europe's waste goes to landfill. Here it's still over 40%, and that's a massive source of greenhouse gases. And you know, and that's spread evenly between commercial organics and residential organics. So, you know, it's a big figure in terms of environmental footprint, but it's a big figure in terms of what the opportunity. So, you know, the answer is in our bins, I guess, is an opportunity, but it's also in harvesting green electrons. So, you know, we like to sort of say, when you're talking about renewable gas, we really don't care, and our customers don't care if it's hydrogen or methane. In fact, most of them don't even understand if it's hydrogen or methane. They just want green gas. So, you know, this is our traditional natural gas model, and unfortunately, Australia, that gas that comes from the wellhead, we're the largest exporter of natural gas in the world, 77 million tonnes per annum, but we also have the most expensive domestic gas in the OECD, and Andrew Leverous told us on Four Corners last week that all of Australia's cheap gas is gone. So I would love to ask him, if all our cheap gas is gone, how come we're still the world's largest exporter of natural gas? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, so our gas transmission network is obviously an ideal network to transmit green molecules in terms of biomethane. Ditto for hydrogen. And you know, we saw yesterday AGIG announced the first gas from their project going in. So you know, this is now starting to happen. The economics of it, I think, are going to be the interesting thing, because even if we get to Mr. Taylor's $2 a kilogram for hydrogen, that's still $20 a gigajoule compared to current natural gas prices of $10 to $14 a gigajoule. So hydrogen is going to be expensive, and I think this is where biomethane looks really good, both into pipelines, but as, you know, there's no reason why that can't go into LNG or CNG, as has been done in Europe and in North America. And in fact, you know, this slide here shows, you know, this is already happening in Europe. There's large volumes of renewable gas going into the networks in Europe, and that's driven by large volumes of waste being diverted from landfill into anaerobic digesters. So if we start to see what this is starting to look like in Australia, so as I said before, we've got very high domestic gas prices, and if governments think that we're going to be able to pay for LNG import terminals, if you go through the fine print, the people who are developing those LNG import terminals say that the gas price point that they need is $12 a gigajoule. Well, if we've got $12 a gigajoule gas coming into our networks as a wholesale price, then get ready for gas prices to go up even higher than they currently are. So, you know, great opportunity for biomethane. I think, you know, to Fiona's point, yes, these projects are economically tough, but I think one of the unique things about Australia is that we have a domestic gas price that is ridiculously high, and I think our current governments will make sure that it stays that way. So let's have a look at McCain's. So at McCain's at Ballarat, they process 600 tonnes a day of potatoes to make 400 tonnes a day of French fries, 200 tonnes a day of waste. So that's the peel, and because potatoes aren't square, it's you know, it's all the round bits that don't go into making square French fries. As I said, they've got an 8 megawatt electrical load, they've got 25 megawatt thermal, and they're committed to net zero. So what drove this project? So they all are already producing biomethane from their covered anaerobic lagoon, but they wanted to improve the quality of that, the deliverability of, and the certainty around that. So, so they felt that the best way to de-risk that was with an on-site anaerobic digester. They're very keen, obviously, to minimise their CO2 CO2 emissions. They want to make sure that they maximise the productivity of biomethane and, as I said, the availability of the gas plant. And they also want to make sure that they could integrate with their behind-the-meter 2.5 megawatt solar array. So, so what does it look like? So, the anaerobic digester so the AD side of it was designed by Wood out of Ontario and Canada, but Wood are McCain's global engineers. They had a sort of a black box, if you like, around the power generation part, and originally it was actually going to come out as gas engines, but we pointed out to them that if they put gas engines in, they would not recover the full amount of heat that we could recover, and to make the gas engines economic, they needed a single 16 or 1200 kilowatt engine. You lose a spark plug, you lose a fan belt, you lose the whole thing. So our 2 times 600 kilowatt micro turbine packages, so our turbine, our largest engine size is 200 kilowatts. So we've got 6 engines there, and we're producing 1200 kilowatts of electrical load. Those, if we put space in to put another 600 kilowatts in, if the biogas production rates exceed the expected numbers. The exhaust, because the exhaust from a gas turbine is basically hot air, 19% oxygen, 2% CO2, it's perfect combustion air for a boiler. So their 25-year-old, 25 megawatt steam boiler is having a new burner fitted to it, which we're doing. And that burner, instead of burning cold combustion air, and Ballarat in the middle of winter is really cold, so instead of burning cold combustion air at 10 degrees Celsius, it's burning hot combustion air at 292 degrees Celsius. We've used a burner from Saki out of Germany. The reason we've used that is because they have extremely good technology on minimising NOx levels. So one of the potential problems that you have when you're using hot combustion air and a hot combustion air that's already got a bit of NOx in it, you need to make sure that you don't create a NOx emission problems. And the Saki NOx, low NOx burners are really, really good. And also we're still looking at potentially developing a hydrogen project at McKenzie behind the meter. So we wanted this burner to be hydrogen ready. So, but by putting that exhaust into the turbine, into the boiler, we get basically full recovery of all the heat that's in the turbine exhaust, and that takes about 15% load, natural gas load, off the McKenzie boiler. So you can see in this waterfall chart here the emission reduction steps that McKenzie have gone through. So the solar array is the block in yellow, and that's now been done. The biodigester and the cogen system in green, so there's the reductions that will come from that. They've secured the rest of their electricity from an off-site PPA, so that's the blue. So that then leaves, you know, how do they get to zero? So there's some additional energy efficiency steps they can do. They've got huge refrigeration plants there, so they've got an opportunity to do some smart re-engineering of their refrigeration systems to reduce that load. But the rest of it is, we believe, will come from grid biomethane. So grid scale biomethane plants that are putting green gas into the network. Customers like McKenzie and other big international companies who have mandated emissions targets, the only way that they'll get there with the current constraints of the electricity grid is green gas in the grid. So that's how McKenzie will get there. Now, what's interesting when you look at the McKenzie facility is that they're directly across the road, that's at the Ballarat Freeway. On the other side is Central Highlands Water. Now, that's currently an aerobic sewage treatment plant. There's no anaerobic digestion going on there. But you look at that and you say, well, geez, if you took the biosolids from that sewage treatment plant, either build another anaerobic digester on site of McKenzie or build an anaerobic digester on site at Central Highlands Water, all of a sudden that orange square here might in fact be able to be produced effectively behind the meter using these biosolids. If you were to do that, and you had some surplus green electricity from solar, because sewage treatment plants generally have a lot of land around them, maybe you might put in a hydrogen electrolyser and then take the oxygen from that electrolyser, turn off the existing aerators, and at Central Highlands Water, it's about 2 megs of electrical load. And if you replaced all that with the same amount of biological oxygen that you need directly from an electrolyser, you save that load for those aerators, and then you obviously look to create value for the hydrogen through mobility markets. So that's I've gone through that relatively quickly. Less than time for questions, but yeah, that's sort of what we're doing. So just in terms of where we're up to, the turbines are on the ground and currently being moved onto their concrete plinths. The biogas compressors are on the ground. And the pipelines between the digester and our plant are currently being planned, and McKenzie have just recently let the order for the anaerobic digester. So, you know, we would hope by first quarter next year that we'd be up and running.
Brilliant. Craig, going well. That's a great story, and I think we might see Fiona come off the mute there for a minute, because you're doing a biohub. This is a biohub, and especially if you start tying in the municipal waste there as well. This is
I mean, it's really exciting when you start to, I mean, it's a beautiful coincidence that the Central Highlands Water are right next door. Now, we haven't got there yet, because Central Highlands Water, that facility is run by an operator, and the operator is pretty happy getting paid to do what they do in the plant as it is. So, there's a role for governments here, I think, to say, and this could be a great stimulus package. Okay, let's look to upgrade reasonable scale sewage treatment plants nationally to reduce their CO2 emissions. And, I think that's probably what that project needs to make that part of it work. But as Fiona said, as well, it's also about adding value from some of the other streams. So if you can get value on the oxygen, value on hydrogen, if you can get value on the CO2, if you're behind the meter like we are with gas turbines, and you use those turbines for FCAS or demand response back to the network, all of these things can potentially add additional value to the project.
Absolutely. Brilliant. And didn't even touch on monetizing digester, as we heard elsewhere.
Exactly.
So another income stream there as well. And maybe Shahana's got a really quick comment there on putting that to the government as a stimulus package of upgrading sewage treatment plants around the country. I'm not sure if anything's been done there. We haven't done that as yet, but just taking notes now. I'm not sure if you're there, Shahana. Okay, never mind. Look, we are getting towards the end. Maybe one quick question here. Craig, how does our dollars and gigajoules, dollars per gigajoule cost of natural gas compare to EU countries or New Zealand, US and the UK? Have you got any comparisons there?
Well, US, Henry Hub prices in the US. So this is gas into the pipeline. When the Henry Hub is one of the main sort of networks in hub points in the United States. And the current Henry Hub price is about $4 per million BTUs, which happens to be around about $4 gigajoule. So we're seeing, there's been a bit of a dip recently, but wholesale prices in Australia, $8-ish to $8 to $10 gigajoule. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, I was at a brick manufacturing facility last week, and they were showing me piles of bricks that they import from Spain. Now, 90% of the cost of making a brick is natural gas. So, you look at stuff like that and say, how the hell does that work?
Such a range of prices here in Australia, from the big industrials still getting $6 per gigajoule to some of the worst I'm aware of is in an urban area for a very large user, still getting charged like $29 a gigajoule.
Yep. There's plenty of that. I mean, most of our big industrial users that we work with are all between $12 and $14 right now, because they're all on 2 and 3 year contracts. So while the spot price right now might be low, most of them are contracted. So not many sit on spot.
Yep. Anyway, we'll watch this space. Craig, many thanks for your presentation today. Great update. Wish you all the luck with the project, and can't wait to see many more of that concept. I haven't seen that concept before, the straight from the micro turbine into this. So it sounds like you're pioneering things, and I imagine this will be catching on around the world. And capstone turbines I think they're in the US there, we'll no doubt be watching and saying, how can we get this done elsewhere as well?
Yeah, and for Gemina, we've recently delivered the world's first 100% hydrogen-fired turbine for their project. And we said to them, well, how would you like to have a hybrid turbine fuel cell? So we took a Ballard 30 kilowatt hydrogen mobility fuel cell, and we built a AS4777 compliant static 30 kilowatt genset that sits in parallel to our turbine. And the way we work that is we base load on fuel cell to maximize efficiency, and then use the turbine to do the peaks and the troughs.
Brilliant, working together. Gives us a lot of confidence, Craig, that we're heading in the right direction, and obviously doing this all on without massive subsidies and what have you. So fantastic. This
I'd
is
love some subsidies, but unfortunately there are none.
yeah, this is economical here and now, so that's great.
Yep.
Thanks again, Craig. Let me just quickly finish off with letting you know what A2EP is working on. And right now we've got this opportunity assessment we're doing for the Race for 2030 CRC, where there's a study going over the next 5 months or so, and to understand the opportunity of on-site anaerobic digestion for power generation and gas and diesel displacement. So we'll be working with Griffith University and no doubt UTS on that one, looking to welcome others who want to get involved in industrial reference groups or workshops. This is going to be very much about understanding the barriers for developing projects and making sure there's good activities put in place to bring those barriers down, especially on approvals. Already hearing about plenty of barriers on approvals. So that's going to be going over sort of the second half of this year, and yet welcome any participation there. Otherwise, please keep in touch with us on our e-news. You can sign up easily if you go into a2ep.org.au. A pop-up will come and throw your details in there, and you can keep up to date with our monthly newsletter to let you know what's upcoming and what's happening there. So all that's left then is to thank our speakers today. Fantastic input, and thanks to those for asking the questions and getting this interactive. Really much appreciated. And thank you for everyone attending, and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thanks very much.